Hello and welcome to my ultimate Tudor quiz. In this quiz, there'll be 10 questions on the remarkable Tudor dynasty that ruled England for a period of 118 years. With each question, there'll be 4 possible answers to choose from. After I have asked the question, I shall give 15 seconds for you to think about your answer, though of course, if you need longer, you can pause the video. The answers will then be given on the next slide. Remember, if you get an answer wrong, that isn't important, as you will have learned something new along the way. The quiz is only meant to be a bit of fun and not taken seriously. I hope you enjoy it. Question 1. What year did Henry Tudor defeat Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth? Was it A. 1465, B. 1475, C. 1485, or D. 1495? The correct answer for question 1 is C. 1485. In 1485, a relatively obscure man of Welsh birth, Henry Tudor, launched an ambitious bid for the English crown, for which he had a weak claim. Henry landed in Wales with a small army before he marched eastwards into England. Richard III, sitting uneasy on the throne that he had taken from his nephew Edward V, got word of Henry's arrival and marched out to meet him. The two sides met at Bosworth in Leicestershire, with the odds stacked in Richard's favour. But the tide of the battle turned in Henry's favour with the intervention of the Stanley family, which led to Henry claiming a remarkable victory, with Richard III lying dead on the battlefield. The Battle of Bosworth spelled the end of the Plantagenets, who had ruled England since 1154. Question 2. Where in Wales was Henry VII born? Was it A. Cardiff, B. Carnarvon, C. Monmouth, or D. Pembroke? The correct answer for question 2 is D. Pembroke. Henry was born in Pembroke Castle in Pembrokeshire, Wales, in late January 1457. His mother, Margaret Beaufort, was just 13 years old at the time, and Henry's father, Edmund Tudor, had died a couple of months earlier of the plague. Henry VII joined Edward II and Henry V in being one of only 3 kings of England to be born in Wales. Question 3. What disaster befell Henry VII in 1502? A. His son and heir died. B. England was invaded. C. His queen died. Or D. The Lambert Simnel Rebellion? The correct answer for question 3 is A. His heir died. Henry had 3 sons with his queen, Elizabeth of York. One had sadly died in infancy in 1500, but in this age that was, tragically, a common part of life. Whilst Henry had his 2 older sons, politically he remained on solid ground. However, the death of his eldest son, Arthur, in 1502 was not only a personal tragedy for the king, and he was devastated at the loss of Arthur, but also potentially a dynastic disaster as well. He now only had one, albeit robust, male heir to succeed him, and if this young prince, also named Henry, succumbed to the realities of life in Tudor England, then the king's hopes of establishing a long lasting dynasty would be dashed. Of course, this Prince Henry would live to succeed his father in 1509. Question 4. How old was Henry VIII when he became King of England? Was he A. 13, B. 17, C. 21, or D. 25? The correct answer for question 4 is B. 17. Henry was a tall, strong, striking young man when he succeeded his father as king in April 1509, with his coronation taking place a few days before his 18th birthday in June of that year. Henry was eager to please his new subjects, and one of his first acts as king was to execute two tax collectors who had become particularly disliked during the reign of his father. Question 5. Which Scottish king was defeated at the Battle of Flodden Field in 1513? Was it A. William the Lion, B. Robert III, C. James IV, or D. David I? The correct answer for question 5 is C. James IV. With Henry VIII preoccupied in France, James IV, married to Henry's sister Margaret, invaded the north of England after his request that Henry ended his campaign in France fell on deaf ears. After causing some considerable destruction, James was confronted and killed by an army led by the Earl of Surrey at the Battle of Flodden, and his bloody coat was sent over the Channel to Henry by Queen Catherine of Aragon. Question 6. Who was Henry VIII referring to when he asked an ambassador, "What sort of leg has he?" Was it A. Emperor Charles V, B. King Francis I of France, C. King James V of Scotland, or D. Thomas More? The correct answer for question 6 is B. Francis I of France. Henry, throughout his reign, saw himself as a big player in European politics, when in reality he was always on the fringes. One of his dreams was to reignite the Hundred Years' War and win glorious victories in battle in France, in the manner of Edward III and Henry V. So when a new and young king came to the French throne in 1515, Henry was eager to know all about him, asking the ambassador whether Francis was as tall as Henry was, whether he was as stoutly built, and Henry even inquired about Francis's legs. Henry even made a show of exposing his own leg to the surely uncomfortable ambassador in order to make a comparison. Question 7. How old was Edward VI when he died in 1553? Was he A. 10, B. 15, C. 20, or D. 25? The correct answer for question 7 is B. 15 years old. It's one of history's great ironies that after all the turmoil and upheaval Henry VIII had caused to get his male heir, that Edward VI would die at an early age without heirs himself, and, despite his best efforts to prevent it, from the throne passing eventually to his half sister, Mary. Edward was a serious and studious young man, probably more like his grandfather, Henry VII, in nature than his father, and he would have made for a strong and capable king had he reigned longer. However, Edward certainly had the famous Tudor temper, and one story claimed he tore an unfortunate live bird to pieces with his bare hands. The story seems to be ridiculous, and is almost certainly false, but is at least an indicator of the more unpleasant side of the young king's temper. Question 8. What year was Lady Jane Grey executed? Was it A. 1554, B. 1556, C. 1558, or D. 1560? The correct answer for question 8 is A. 1554. The unfortunate Jane Grey was just 16 years old when she was executed inside the walls of the Tower of London in 1554. Before her own beheading, Jane had seen the headless corpse of her young husband, Guilford Dudley, covered under a bloody sheet, being carted away. For Mary the seemingly reluctant to order Jane's death, the act had proved to be necessary to try and establish some authority over the country, which was already restless with Mary's unpopular proposed marriage to Prince Philip of Spain. The Wyatt rebellion threatened to cause further trouble. The execution of Jane Grey, though, was the beginning of a short and increasingly unhappy reign for Mary. Question 9. What disease nearly killed Elizabeth I in 1562? Was it A. the plague, B. sweating sickness, C. tuberculosis, or D. smallpox? The correct answer for question 9 is D. smallpox. In October 1562, still early in her long reign, Queen Elizabeth I fell gravely ill with smallpox, and at one stage she appeared to be close to death. Somehow she recovered, but she would be left bearing the scars of her illness for the rest of her life. To cover them, Elizabeth would use heavy makeup. This narrow escape, though, would not prevent Elizabeth from becoming one of history's great rulers. Question 10. Where was Mary Queen of Scots executed in 1587? Was it A. the Tower of London, B. Pontefract Castle, C. Fotheringay Castle, or D. Bamborough Castle? The correct answer for question 10 is C. Fotheringay Castle. The life of Mary Queen of Scots was a dramatic one, to say the least. She became Queen of Scots when she was just 6 days old. She was briefly Queen Consort of France through her short-lived marriage to King Francis II. Her second of three husbands was murdered in suspicious circumstances, and she was forced to abdicate the Scottish throne in 1567. Mary would spend the best part of 2 decades in captivity in England, where she became a clear threat to Queen Elizabeth I. Eventually, she was executed, but her beheading was not a smooth one. On the day itself, Mary was said to be cheerful and smiling, but after she had laid her head on the block, the executioner made a terrible job of carrying out his task. The first blow of the axe crashed into the back of Mary's head, and it was a messy job thereafter.